In this video, we will examine verses 5 and 6 of Surah Tariq, which relate to how the biological creation of a human being begins, which has been subject to criticism. The verses in question say that man was created from a spurting fluid, and that the water came out between the backbone and the rib cage. If the spurting fluid that is semen from a man, we all know that semen does not come out of the abdominal cavity between the backbone and the rib cage. So is there really a scientific mistake in this verse as claimed?
The verse you have also read is quite interesting. When we make a scientific critique and analysis, we realize that the testes referred to here is the testis, the cells that originate from the testes of the human being together with the appendage glands. Here they have commented that this means that science is in conflict with modern science. And that made me very sad. But when you really look into it, it is very clear that what is being referred to in this verse is not the spermatozoon cell, which is the gametes of the male, but the oocyte cell, which is the gametes of the female. To understand this well, we need to look at anatomy. When we look at human anatomy, friends, the vertebrae in the back, the costal regions in the chest, and the pelvic region immediately below it, and an area we call the pelvic cavity. The structures we call the urogenital system within the pelvic cavity. However, this system is also integrated into the vertebrae coming from the back at the same time in the posterior region of the sacrum. In the costal regions, which also refers to the chest area, and the bone areas we call the sternum in front are the regions that make up our abdominal cavity. When we look at the anatomical position of this urogenital system, which we call the uterus or ovary, on the dorsal side of the pelvic floor, and especially in the pelvic cavity, spreading towards the right and left laterals, it shows a fringed feature in the region, extending from the uterus to the ovaries, especially the responsible parts of the uterus and the related infundibulum or fallopian tubes, and at the same time the fallopian tubes, which are not directly connected to the ovaries but extend to the ovaries.
Well, Professor, as the Quran states, are the reproductive organs and tissues of women located close to the ribs?
Yes, it's exactly as you say. The ovary in a woman, which excretes an oocyte every 28 days in a month, on average every 78 days. There is an oocyte excretion and a gamete excretion. The word here is also very important. That is, there is an expulsion at a great pressure. Really, the wall of the ovary of the follicular structure becomes very tense and quickly throws the egg upwards and makes contact with the area that we call this infundibulum, or the fringed areas of the follicular tubes. And after this contact, the journey of the oocyte towards the fallopian tubes begins. What we call the female oocyte or the female gamete travels in the fallopian tubes, where fertilization takes place in the fallopian tubes by meeting spermatozoa in the areas we call ampulla and ampulla isthmus in the middle region.
So, with sperm cells from the man, then egg cells from the woman?
In the middle part of the fallopian tube, in the ampulla region, in the ampulla isthmus region, the ampulla fuses and then begins to divide, mitotic division. This is already explained in detail in high schools and universities. First, it is a single cell, then 2, then 4, 8, 16, 32, then morula, compact morula, then early blastocyst, late blastocyst, until the stage we call hatched. Finally, by tearing the sheath in that area, which we call zona pellucida, the fertilized blastocyst, which we call implantation in this way, settles on the uterine wall, the uterus of the woman, and slowly begins to suck blood from there. And this occurs on average in 7 days. And due to this blood supply, it gradually begins to take root deep into the uterus epithelium, and gradually placental structures begin to take shape in this period. Of course, if we emphasize again, the point in this verse is not the spermatozoon cell of the man, but the structure of the oocyte that is expelled from the woman's friends, the oocyte that is expelled from the woman once a month from a fluid-filled follicular structure. Indeed, when I read this verse as a scientist, I got goosebumps. It's really quite thought-provoking that this verse can inspire or provide information for today within the framework of the message given by the Holy Quran 1,400 years ago. Moreover, as you know, the microscope was gradually emerging in the 18th century. It is only possible to understand a spermatozoon cell, an oocyte, in an environment where there is a microscope, only in specialized microscopes, which we call a stereomicroscope, or similar electron microscopes, which allow us to make deeper analysis. So this information in the Holy Quran is not a testicular spermatozoon cell, as some people claim. Secondly, from time to time, we read it in some sources and students bring it to us. Teacher, was this information available in ancient Sumerian sources, or was it in ancient Indian medicine medicine, Chinese medicine, Turkish medicine, or Greek medicine? Many similar questions come in this way. Since I'm also interested in the medicine of that period, we also look at the medical texts of those periods as it is our field. All of the medical texts from those times, friends, there are two periods, embryonic and fetal. The first 8 weeks, some scientists call the first 10 weeks the embryonic period. After that is the fetal period. Therefore, in the embryonic period, when people in the field of medicine in ancient times had the opportunity to anatomically examine the uterus of many deceased pregnant women, that is the information that is recorded in the records about those periods. But in the Holy Quran, the zygote is mentioned in a very different way from this. What is it called? Nutfa. I think it is mentioned as nutfa in the Holy Quran, and this or the structures that we call spermatozoa.
It is mentioned in the Holy Quran as follows. That is to say, we created human beings from a mixed semen, or rather, it is not correct to say semen. It says from a mixed nutfa. That is to say that the nutfa is actually a mixture, something that comes out of the combination of two different things that are
In this sense, this points to the zygote. In other words, the spermatozoon, the fertilizing factor in the male and the female, as you know, was not known at that time because there was no microscope. In the female, the oocyte structure in the ovaries could not be observed because there was no microscope. But the fact that in the Holy Quran, these two structures come together in a combined or mixed sense to express the creation of man clearly shows that these two come together, and this is called the nutfa, and this nutfa is called the zygote. When we look at it in this way, the zygote, as we said, is not something that can be seen with the eye, but it can be seen in stereo microscopes or epifluorescence microscopes. Moreover, one of the large cells in the human body is the oocyte, but the sperm cell is a very, very small cell.
Do you mean to say that there are records of the embryonic period in ancient Indian medicine and Sumerian tablets?
Depending on cadaver records,
Cadaveric observations were made, but these are observations of the fetal period.
fetal and advanced fetal period.
There were no observations of the embryonic period. This was not very clearly known. The period of the creation of man that the Holy Quran talks about is very much about
Mentioning the zygote, the first period, so the first period refers to the beginning of the embryonic period.
so it's impossible to understand it without a microscope.
It is not possible, but the fact that it was mentioned in the Holy Quran 1400 years ago is very interesting and meaningful. It shows that there is no contradiction. This information in the Holy Quran is supported by the fact that it meets modern medicine and modern science.